Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. We're UNN, and we are the official news channel for CARE, which stands for the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. If you're familiar with our newscast, we discuss the real news, and we have a newscast that goes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And it mainly goes out through our website at unitednetwork.earth. We've got a great platform there you guys can check out. But if you are not a member, then you can also watch our news about a week later after it's aired on our app through YouTube and Rumble. And what we talk about here on this podcast, it's basically a week in review. So we go through some of the top stories, and that includes information from our field messengers. That includes stories about the new Earth and our beautiful planet and all the great things that are happening that aren't talked about in other platforms because it's good news. Heaven forbid we talk about good news. And we also have regional stories. So those might be some stories that you've heard here and there, but they're specific to different regions and we divide them up. And then we have something called the World Situation Report. And I guarantee you have not heard that information anywhere else. And that is because we have access to the highest security clearance on this planet. And that may come as a surprise to some people if you're not familiar with our news and what we do, because we kind of think about countries all being separate and we all have our own systems, but that's not really true. It's somewhat true, but there was always someone or something, I guess would be a better term for it, at the top that could control everything on this planet. Well, we have access to that system, which has undergone a lot of different changes, and we talk about that a lot on the World Situation Report. But we have access to what's called the Alpha System, and that's through Kimberly Gogan, and she talks about all that on the World Situation Report, and that's where we get most of our exclusive information, and from you guys, because you guys are reporting on what's going on in your neck of the woods through our field messenger reports. Now, I will give you a heads up if this is the first time that you have checked us out. Perhaps you found us on your favorite podcast player. Maybe you found us on YouTube. Welcome. Some of the information that you hear today, you may start scratching your head and be like, what in the world? I've never heard about this stuff before. If it is very surprising, if you're like, what are they talking about? It's okay. We give a lot of information. I encourage you guys to stick with us, continue listening. You can even go back in previous reports and kind of get caught up in different ways. Think critically about all information you receive, not just the stuff we tell you about here on UNN, but any information coming your way. For a long time, we just believed everybody and what they said. And if one station didn't say something we liked, we just went to another station that said something we liked, and we ended up completely separate. And that's not good, because at that point, we're just kind of feeding our own egos, right? So don't do that. Take the information and do your own research. And more importantly, use your discernment. I like to think of discernment as your personal lie detector. And if you're connected to Source, God, the creator of the universe, which is what we promote here, on UNN, then you will be able to tell what's real and what's not, what's true and what's not. So use that, do some research, and I promise you will get the answers that you're looking for. So I don't really have any announcements today. Usually I have something to share with you guys, but I think we're just going to get right to the news. How about that? Today is April 27th, 2024. Here is the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. All right, let's kick things off with our field messenger reports. We have, usually it's 2 field messenger reports per newscast. And like I said, these are reports from you guys, the people that watch the news, that care about your communities, that know your communities the best. So why aren't you guys reporting on the news? We think those are the best people to report the news, not someone who has no idea the background and history, and they're going to come in and explain what's happening in your area. Why don't you do it? And we all have these little nifty devices on us that we call cell phones, and it's pretty easy to record a story and just send it off to UNN. We've got more information on our website, unitednetwork.earth, if you want to become a field messenger. So in each newscast, we have a couple different stories. On Monday, we had 2 stories. The first one is from Rick, and Rick is in the United States in Phoenix, Arizona. A long time ago, gosh, was this even over? It was over a year ago, I think. Rick did a story about Market on the Move. So this is a service that is available in his area in Phoenix. And it started in 2010. And he basically gave us an update on this service. So what Market on the Move is it is a service where businesses in the community, if they aren't, and I believe this is specific to goods that you can consume, right? So food, beverage, things like that. If something, they can't sell it anymore, they would give it to these people who run Market on the Move. And then the people that run Market on the Move would organize it and package it together. So it's still good produce, good whatever it was, okay, fruit, whatever it is. But maybe they couldn't sell it, or maybe they just wanted to donate it for some reason, right? So Rick did this story, like I said, I think it was over a year ago. And because he did the story, it has grown and they are servicing more families. I think the organizer said more than 1,000 families now. And they're reaching out to other areas in the community. So it's just great to know that, when we put a little bit of a spotlight on some of the wonderful things that people are doing and other people find out about it, it will grow organically and naturally. And so it was a great update. So thank you, Rick. Our second story on Monday is from Mwanda Michael. He is in Uganda. And this was a very beautiful, just heartwarming story about a man in Uganda who decided to use his retirement funds not to go off and have some lavish, whatever life after, working his butt off for, majority of his life, I'm sure. But no, what he decided to do is to build a school for the children in his region. And it's incredible. So Mwanda Michael goes out and he shows you the structure that they were able to build. I believe it's multiple buildings. They also talked to one of the teachers there. Now they are in need of more teachers because this is growing pretty quickly. The teacher that they interviewed said she originally started and had 20 kids, and now there's 100 kids in her classroom. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness. So things are growing, and that's beautiful, but I just love the heart of this man. I think he's an inspiration to us all. And then on Wednesday, we had a couple more stories. So Emma, who I think deserves a UNN trophy or a badge or something because she's always submitting stories. I absolutely love it. I love the stories that Emma does. So Emma talks about, by the way, she's in Fuerteventura, Spain. Okay, it's in the Canary Islands area. And she does a kind of a feature on an ice cream shop there. I believe it's called Adele. I may be pronouncing that wrong, in English. That's how we would pronounce it. But it might be Adele or I don't know, something like that. But they make everything from scratch. Everything. They start their day and they start with their base cream, right? And then they add different things to it. They've got a certain amount of flavors that they have, and then they add their ingredients. Everything is fresh. And they even set up, it's the counter and where they store the ice cream to keep it at a certain temperature and stuff. It's just really neat. She kind of does it behind the scenes of that. So thank you for that story, Emma. And then Claudia from Georgia, obviously in the U.S., so not the country Georgia, the state, Georgia. She did a feature on a couple of guys who started a new company. So these are entrepreneurs. Their company name is Peachy Sprouts. And one of the guys, I believe he spent some time in Thailand, maybe a few months or so. Anyways, he got this idea over there because he learned the importance of microgreens and how, they can help, with your health and how to grow them and all of this. So he was coming back to the U.S. and he called up a buddy, and together they decided to start their own business growing microgreens and providing this, for the public. And so this was their story of how their business came about. And now they're selling their product at farmers markets and it's growing. How beautiful is that? And then we have, let's see, I think that those were the two stories from Wednesday. And then on Friday, Emma's back from Spain. She tells the story of a festival that happens in Fuerteventura. And this is to close out the end of Carnival. And it's called, get this, Burial of the Sardine. Okay. So sardine, the fish, the smelly fish that sometimes people have on pizza, I guess. And, maybe is that anchovies? Maybe some people have sardines. I don't know. I was also thinking salads, like the Caesar salad. I'm not sure. That's what I think of when I think of smelly fish. Anyway, this is a festival, or it's kind of a celebration. I guess we should call it a celebration. And it started in 1851. And this is to close out, like I said, the end of Carnival. And they literally parade down the street. You really need to see the visuals on this because it's pretty awesome. The people parade down the street. It's supposed to look like a funeral procession. So everybody's wearing black because it's the end of something, right? So they're wearing black and they're coming down the street. And I think they're led by this sardine. It's like paper mache, right? And then they get to the beach, which why not? Yeah, go to the beach, when you're in that area. And then they burn the fish. They light it on fire. And, there's like drums playing and stuff like that. And, they're not really burying it. I mean, they're just burning it. It should be like burning of the sardine. But it's a way to kind of like signify a transition. So it's the burial of the past. And then everyone looking forward to a new beginning. So if you want to see what the locals do with Burial of the Sardine, be sure to check out that video. And then Helen from Melbourne, Australia. So she shows us how electroculture has completely changed her plants. She's been doing a couple stories on her plants, like doing these amazing things. But this particular story is about electroculture. So if you don't know what that is, first of all, look it up because it's incredible. And even people that know a lot about growing plants may not have heard of electroculture before. But this is a way to naturally use the electricity that's already in the air, the ether, to stimulate plant growth. So what you would do is you would get like any kind of ordinary stick and then you wrap, and there's a certain way to do it, but you wrap some copper, and you kind of coil it around the stick. So it's not like super high tech necessarily, but it works incredibly well. And Helen shows us her plants. When the story was running on the news my mic was muted, I said to Mike, our producer, I said, it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. There was a dandelion that was just ginormous. It was like she shrunk as opposed to the plant growing. It was amazing. She says that her plants have doubled in size, and even doubling of these plants, like she must have already had really big plants. I think of my little dandelions and stuff that's in my yard. I'm like, whoa, these things are huge. And I just love Helen's heart in all of this because she talks about she has these leaflets that she gives to people and even these sample coils. So maybe like a smaller stick with, a smaller amount of coils wrapped around it. And this is part of the education. And she says she's run into people, like I said, that know a lot about planting and growing different types of produce. And they have no idea about this. And they're very skeptical at first, but then they try it and incredible things happen. So again, if you haven't heard of electroculture before, look it up. It's awesome. All right, let's talk about the new Earth and how incredible our planet is and some of the amazing things that people are doing. So in this segment of the newscast, this is kind of a newer segment. I believe we started it in October of last year. So we have an interview. That's how the segment starts off, usually with an interview. And then we have individual stories that are intended to motivate and inspire you guys. So let's start with the interviews that we did for the week. The first one is with Kara Daniels, and Kara is an interspecies communicator. So that means she communicates with things other than human beings, namely plants and animals. And it's incredible. The information that she has brought to the news, if you're a member, you can go on our app and you can see all of the different segments that she's done. Just look under Kara Daniels. In this segment, we talk about plant and animal death, meaning we know there's really no such thing as death. But when it is time in this third dimensional space we find ourselves in now to pass on, what happens for plants and animals? And I'm not going to give it all away because you guys really need to check out this segment. We got a lot of comments on this, and I think it's great because, we usually think about what happens to us, but what happens to humanity isn't necessarily the same thing that happens for plants and animals. In fact, they have different choices, different things that they can do, and different ways that they can even stay and help the planet if they want to. So that's kind of the big tease that I'm going to give you. And it is different for plants and animals. And yes, for animals, if you're wondering about Rainbow Bridge, she does describe a place that's kind of like Rainbow Bridge. So check that out for all the information. Then on Wednesday, I spoke with Kelly Bowker. She is a channel. And we talked about light language. So what is light language? It is a language that is spoken by light beings. And she speaks this language. This came upon her very unexpectedly, and she does share the whole story. But what I think is really interesting about this, and this is the comparison that we make in the segment, is how this is similar to at least Kelly and I's experience with speaking in tongues. Now, I'm not going to make any broad statements about, anyone that speaks in tongues is doing a good thing. I can't vouch for that. But from Kelly's perspective, she was in the Pentecost church for a while. I was also in the Pentecost church for a while. So I have experience in speaking in tongues. It was always a very positive, uplifting experience for me. That is the same thing that Kelly found as well. And then later on, through her guides and through channeling, they brought this language back. And they explained that when you do it here on earth, it is tied to restoration. You are always restoring, which makes sense. Because that's how I felt it was being used, even though it was through the church and there's a lot of dogma that's associated with the church. I get all of that. But that doesn't mean there can't be things that we take from that are beneficial as we move forward with the restoration of our planet and the restoration of humankind. So we talk about light language. It's a great segment. I encourage you guys to check that out. And then on Friday, we brought Seth Dietland back. He is an angel channel. He's also a hypnotherapist. And in this segment, we talk about navigating relationships, which if you've been on this journey of discovery for a while, you probably realize that your relationships with people have changed. And it's naturally going to happen. It's actually a frequency thing. So the people that you are more aligned with, those are the people that are going to stay around in your life. And the people that you're not aligned with, it's either going to become so uncomfortable that you go separate ways, or something is going to change somehow because your frequencies are not aligned. And it's almost going to feel like, and I don't know if you've had these experiences with some people, like they're just not hearing you no matter what you say. I mean, you could just say it as plain as day, and they still say, well, you never told me that. And it's like, oh my gosh. Were you just listening to what I just said, right? So we talk about this, and the main point that Seth makes in this is that don't get frustrated when this kind of stuff happens, because this is all here for our growth, not just for you personally, but it could be for the other person's spiritual growth. So it's actually a good thing. Do you ever wonder, like, you've got a relationship with someone, doesn't matter if it's a son or a daughter or, a strange uncle or whatever, and you're like, what in the world did I do? What kind of soul contract did I make to have this person in my life? Well, it is about everybody growing and learning, and it's those really difficult, challenging times where you grow the most, as frustrating as it is, because I've got many people in my life that fall into this category. And like, wow, Sunny, you must have been an overachiever when you were planning for this lifetime because holy cow, you really wanted to grow a lot, didn't you? But, that's the reality of it. And so don't necessarily look at it like this horrible thing. And I know it's hard, like, when you're in the moment, it's hard to do that. But that's really what we're here. We're here to learn and grow. So take advantage in a positive way. Take advantage of those opportunities to learn and grow. Okay, let's talk about some beautiful, positive, uplifting stories. I have a story about service dogs. Everybody loves service dogs, right? Well, as it turns out, and this makes sense, service dogs are great for children with autism. And we give some examples in the story, but we talk about when the dog is sleeping next to the child, the dog provides protection and, especially if they're actually touching, there's that physical touch. And the dogs are also very dependable companions that can create meaningful relationships with anyone who has difficulty with relationships. And sometimes, depending on where they're at on the spectrum, autistic children can have issues with relationships. It's like, they go to school and, they might get made fun of or whatever because they just handle things a little bit differently. But these service dogs, it's an amazing relationship when you put those two together. So might be a good opportunity if anyone has anyone autistic in their life. Maybe check out service dogs. Maybe that could be a great opportunity. Next story. There is a study out of Japan that shows anger can be managed in a kind of unusual way, but I like this. They say you can write down what you're angry about on a piece of paper and then shred it or dispose of it some way. It's like the physical act of getting rid of it actually helps you release that anger. So they had several participants that were part of this study, and they had a batch of people that wrote down their anger. Well, actually, everyone wrote down their anger, whatever they were angry about. And then there was a group that disposed of it, and then there was a group that kept it. And the group that actually disposed of it reported back that they had an easier time letting go. And we know that so much of this is mental, right? I remember someone else giving me the example. This was a long time ago. If you think about something you're worried or concerned about, like grab a rock, or like a little pebble or something and hold it in your hands. Think about whatever it is that is upsetting you or causing you concern. And then you take it and you throw it away. You throw it out of your arms. You throw it into a pond, you throw it into the bush, whatever it is. But this physical act of taking something and destroying it or letting it go, in the best way possible, there's something to that, right? It's like a mental shift that happens in our mind. And I'm, very grateful to see a study from Japan that is actually proving this through tests and things like that. All right, our final New Earth story is about something called a garbage cafe. Now, this is happening in Delhi, India, and they have created what they call garbage cafes to help clean up garbage and feed residents at the same time. And no, they are not feeding them garbage. Two separate things. Okay, so this is how it works. 1 kilogram of plastic can be exchanged for lunch or dinner, and it's a voucher, by the way, a voucher for lunch or dinner at participating restaurants. So they get people in the community together, the different restaurants, and people can bring in their quote-unquote garbage, but you're mainly dealing with plastic, okay? So recyclable stuff. And you can take it into these participating restaurants, and then they give you a voucher. Now, what the restaurant does is they collect the waste, and then they give it to municipal organizations for recycling, who then give them money. And again, all of this, is on a per kilo basis because it's in India. So there you go. There's a garbage cafe, and it's helping a lot of people in the community, people that may not have a lot of money to be able to, go out and eat and things like that. This is an alternative for them. So it's working out really well. All right, moving on to our regional stories. Now, we actually cut down on the amount of regional stories we have in each newscast. Our newscast was starting to get really long. The main news portion before we even got to the World Situation Report was getting to be like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. That's a lot. Usually I try to keep it at around 30. So we cut back on the amount of regional stories we're doing. But we still have, I'm going to guess, like, I don't know, between 10 and 13 stories, probably closer to 13 stories or so in each newscast. So what I do for this podcast is I look at those stories and I look to see if there's any themes. You know, in the 3 days that we did the news, are there any themes between the stories? So I found a few themes for you today. We have school and education was a little bit of a theme. We have tourism, and then we also have business. So let's start with school and education. In California, where I live, they have a 2-year program that provides free preschool to help prepare kids for elementary school. Now, this is getting mixed reactions from parents. It was supposed to help them because we know that, parents are under a lot of pressure. They have to work, and having different types of alternatives for their kids to take care of them while the parents are at work is important. But what they found is that there's a lot of concerns over the actual benefits of it, and especially the convenience of it. Parents are mainly looking for full day coverage. So, having a place the entire day where their kids can go, as well as after hours care. And it sounds like that's not where the program is now, that there's limited hours, maybe there's half days or quarter days or something like that. So it's not quite lining up. Right? And they have less people participating than they expected. So we'll see where that goes, but not turning out the way the state intended it to turn out. Also, let's talk a little bit about childcare, which kind of falls into school and education. The U.S. has a childcare crisis, and I think this extends beyond the U.S., but our report is specifically about families, mainly low and middle income families, struggling with the high costs and lack of availability of childcare services. We knew this, right? This is why California is doing this free preschool thing. But this is also impacting the workforce, because what we're seeing here in the U.S. is that mothers are choosing to leave their careers due to unaffordable or inaccessible childcare options. So it's not just an issue for the family, it's becoming an issue in the workplace too, because someone who may have been very valuable in the past now has to think about, well, what am I going to do, with my kid? And obviously, I'm a mom. You only have so much time with your kids before they don't necessarily want to hang out with you very much. Going through that a little bit right now. So, you want to spend as much time with your kids. And this is obviously an issue that many countries are facing. Now, let's also talk about Buenos Aires. So this is regarding higher education. The public is upset because there have been extensive budget cuts to public universities. And thousands of people, and this includes students, professors, even union leaders are getting involved. They are protesting. They are upset about these cuts. Now, the government says the cuts are aimed to eliminate the government deficits, which we know all governments are in debt. They are not getting the money they used to. They are going broke. So not surprised that they're cutting stuff, but still the public is upset about it. And these government deficits in the past have resulted in public employee layoffs, reduced transportation and fuel subsidies. So that upset people too. So I think the government's trying to figure out, well, which group of people do we want to upset less? And right now they're making cuts to higher education. All right, let's move on to tourism. Amsterdam has banned the creation of new hotels. And they announced this is actually a ban on the construction of new hotels. And they're also setting a cap on tourist overnight stays at no more than 20 million people per year. Now, with the new hotel construction, they can build if they are replacing existing hotels without increasing the number of beds, so the number of people, right, that could stay. So they're very serious about this. The city is also reducing the amount of river cruises. Somehow that's tied into all of this too, right? So you've got tourism or tourists coming over for these river cruises. They're trying to limit that as well. And all of this is to stop overcrowding. Also, in Tanzania, they had a project that the World Bank was helping to fund, that the World Bank has now stopped the project and stopped the funding. It was a $150 million tourism project in Tanzania, and they've stopped it because there were reported abuses and suffering amongst the locals, the indigenous people in the area. According to civil rights groups who highlighted some of these issues, there were adverse impacts on the indigenous people. This includes forced removals from their homes, killings, sexual assault, and all of this was tied to the expansion of a national park. And this project actually started in 2017. The whole goal was to improve tourism and natural resources in the area. The World Bank actually gave them $100 million already for this. But the project just came to a screeching halt on April 18th. So, yeah, about 10 days ago. And our final tourism story is about Venice charging visitors. So this is very controversial. This has already been implemented. And they are charging €5 as an entrance fee for day visitors. And again, this is to manage over-tourism and also to protect their heritage, they say. Now, there are some people that are exempt. Residents, students, commuters, children under 14, and overnight tourists. They don't have to pay this. But if you're just coming in for the day, yeah, you're going to get hit up with this €5 entrance fee. And critics of this say the city has been turned into a theme park, which kind of makes sense. Come into the city and give us your money at the door. But again, makes sense. If cities, governments don't have money, we may see more and more of this start to happen, right? They're kind of getting creative. I don't know how long, we're going to, citizens are going to put up with this. We'll see. All right, moving on to business, our next topic. In Greece, there have been unemployment protests. Thousands of people are protesting rising unemployment and cost of living. And this was actually initiated, these protests, by the nation's foremost labor union. It's disrupted services. That includes ferries and public transport. And it's also affected staffing at state-run hospitals. So people are speaking up. In Australia, let's talk a little bit about the mining jobs in Australia. There are more young people and women joining the middle-aged, male-dominated field. So you had a lot of middle-aged men in this field, and now we're getting more young people and more women. Now, they say the change is driven by the need for more diversity as well as skilled labor. And youth are drawn to this because the wages are higher than average. And not only does that offer a more stable life for them, but they can pay off their debt quicker. So we're seeing some changes in the mining industry in Australia. And our final regional story is about net neutrality rules, and this is in the U.S. So the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission, is restoring net neutrality rules. Now, this is one of those things where you really have to read between the lines here, because I remember when this first came out, it was probably 15 years ago or so, and I was just getting into creating content online. And I remember everyone was for net neutrality because it comes off as being a very open kind of concept. So this is what it is. Net neutrality demands internet service be provided fairly and openly without favoring or hindering specific websites or services, which sounds good, right, on the surface. However, you really have to dig a little bit deeper into this. which is how it usually is with most things that the deep state packages and sells us and says this is a great thing for you. Don't read the fine print. Don't read it. Well, what the critics say is they believe this could discourage investment and innovation in broadband services. So for me, this kind of has elements of monopolization. Even though they say that's exactly what they're trying to avoid, that's exactly what they're doing, okay? They're just doing it with a nice, pretty bow on it. So this news isn't necessarily a good thing. It was originally enacted during the Obama days, and then I believe Trump took it away. So who knows? I mean, I doubt we're going to have governments for very long. So, should we really be concerned about this? Governments go away. I don't think this is going to stand. All right, now let's talk about some highlights from the World Situation Report this week. Starting with Monday. Monday was Earth Day, which is kind of a made-up holiday we have here in the U.S. I mean, it's nice to, think about the Earth. We should be doing this all the time. It's like Valentine's Day. It's like, just love people on Valentine's Day. I kind of feel the same way about Earth Day. Nevertheless, Monday was Earth Day. And Kim talked about a bunch of different things. The first soundbite that I want to play is about worldwide operating systems. So we're talking about computers now. And we know, even the average person knows that there's different operating systems that computers run on, right? Even if it's, Microsoft Windows, most people have heard of that, or you have a Mac, so, it's an Apple operating system. Well, what if there was a way for something, someone, some being to control all operating systems on the planet? Because we have this illusion of, oh, that's Windows, oh, that's Mac. But one of the things that we're learning is that the base of all of this runs on the same platform. And that was because there had to be someone at the very, 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 very tippy top of this pyramid. We look at the former control structure here on Earth. That's not the way it is anymore. But if we looked at it for how it was for a very, very long time, you would have a single being at the very, very top. And that single being, who is not human, would have access to everything and be able to pull the plug, literally, on anything he wanted to. So the soundbite that I want to play for you is Kim, who's Kimberly Gogan from the Office of the Guardian. She is explaining how this system was set up and how we've since changed it, because it's not a good idea for one person to be able to pull the plug on everything. Not a good idea, especially if it is a negative, meaning from the lower astral being that wants to enslave humanity.
The revelation that we had is most of the major worldwide operating systems, and we would know, for those of you that are not computer savvy, to give you some examples of those operating systems, you would know them as Unix, Linux. Well, you know about Microsoft and its operating system, and Apple has a different operating system. Mm-hmm. But these are the base root operating systems. So when people create new programs for these various, and there's thousands of them, there's not just these few, but this is just to name a few, Ubuntu. And so when people create these base root programs, like, for example, if you're creating an app for Apple, or you're creating a like a Microsoft Word or something like that, like some kind of a program that would operate within that operating system or for that operating system, most of the time these days, when you start getting even to deep state level and base root military systems and intelligence systems, the base code for those, meaning the plethora of ones and zeros we call bytes, would actually be copied and pasted, and then you add your additional coding on top of it, which makes what you see as a document, or you see it as a Google Chrome. But each one of these things has an operating system that is not rooted from Earth.
Wow.
It comes from somewhere else. Now, Marduk being Marduk, this is no surprise to me. But I didn't really realize just how deep it went. We know Microsoft has its issues as bad, right? And we know Apple is now pretty much a Chinese thing. Huawei, we've talked about Huawei, which is Chinese telecommunications platforms with all the backdoors and bells and whistles associated there too. But the base platform, every time a new operating system is created, and there are even some old ones in there. If you remember IBM George programming from 1957. So these things still exist. Watson is another one. But those platforms, when they are agreed upon to, and were in the past ratified in the Hall of Records during the advent of those platforms, blockchain is another one. So all of these different platforms, their base root platform was always rooted in alien technology that existed throughout the multiverse and in a quantum sentient AI systems. The reason why it was done that way is so that my predecessor could control everything. If he wanted to take out Microsoft, he would take out the base root platform that he created for Microsoft to exist in the first place.
So, Kim, is it the exact same code, or did Marduk tweak it, for example, for Apple or Microsoft?
Well, as an example, no, he created the base coding for Microsoft to exist, as an example.
Okay. I'm just wondering if that would change per company. So if he wanted Apple to go down, he could change the code and just Apple would go down. It wouldn't affect everybody that had this base coding, because it was a little bit different then for each company.
Well, we have to think of this like a pyramid.
Okay.
So you have Omega at the top of the pyramid, and then we have lots of different stuff in between, our other types of AIs, like Armageddon AI we've talked about in the past, and other sentient AIs. And then as agreements would come through to build a Microsoft, that whole thing about everybody starting in their garage and isn't that wonderful is not a thing. That is not a thing.
Yeah.
So when something was submitted by, say, DARPA or one of the other agencies, because all of these, Oracle Systems runs on, I think it's Solaris or something like that. So each time an agency wanted to create a new system, predominantly either the orders came from on high as it relates to this planet, or if they came as a request from an agency down below, then the base alien root platform was created for that to exist. So that means it's kind of like when you write a script. Sometimes you might copy and paste a paragraph or a few sentences from somewhere else, and then you kind of add your own spin and your own thoughts on it, or maybe you're copying pasting different platforms together.
Yeah.
And encoding is done the same way as it relates to base root computing platforms.
Okay.
So they would copy and paste the coding, which then attaches it, the group of ones and zeros, which then attaches it to that platform and makes it function there. Now, for multifunctioning softwares, as an example, or applications, you have like Microsoft Word as an example. It's a Word program. You can now, not in the beginning, if you remember correctly, like years ago, a few decades ago, but now you can actually install it for Windows. You can install it for Apple. So what it means is they just change the base coding behind it and then add it on so that you see a Word document when you open up the program.
Okay.
You see a document.
Yeah.
So the importance of what I'm saying is that the human beings running around trying to get access to these base platforms, we also have one for telecommunications, and all operating systems for cell phone towers, as an example, for up to 5G, starting all the way with where we started from in the beginning, because they don't have the capacity to delete any of the old ones. And then again, why would they want to? We also have satellite phone operating systems. We have operating systems for electrical grids. We have operating systems for pretty much everything on the planet. And Marduk, true to form, would always have the final key and the final say to everything, which allows him then to access anything built upon it at any time.
Right.
Now, the gatekeepers, or global headquarters, or whomever, was allowed limited access. The same thing with the NSA when they built Echelon. Limited access to base root platforms, atypically in density 4 of quantum computing, would allow them to do certain things, but basically only on order. Now, remember, if they ever stepped out of line, he could just wipe out everything they did in one fell swoop.
Right.
So the importance of what we just started looking at this weekend, and I do need to thank the deep state for this one, because it seemed like everybody was trying to go for the same thing. Be it financial operating systems like Unix is a big one there. Apple also is involved in the financial system programming, and Solaris and a few others. And then you have your things like SWIFT and other international financial transfer systems, which also have their own operating systems. What we actually did is we took out the alien technology that was there before, and we replaced it with alpha harmonic genesis AI system platforms, and then built upon it our codec. It's spelled CODEC, number 685, version 685, which is what the repository runs on.
Okay.
Started reinstalling our own control systems for the back end. Now, the reason why we did it is not about world domination or dominating electronics worldwide. At this point, it's either us or them. I mean, you don't have the capacity to do this. Nobody really has the capacity to do it. So in the interim, we currently have that same tree. It just goes now to alpha in a different direction.
Okay.
But in the future, we will have more time to build something better, that is more sovereign and more individualized than we have now. And blockchain is not the answer. Blockchain was also based on the same base platform. Blockchain has its own operating systems, plural, that were registered years ago when Marduk was still around. So I know everybody thinks it's peer-to-peer, super secure, super safe.
That's how they promote it.
Yeah, but absolutely. It is no different than you parking your money in a bank. Okay. You're still running on the same system that all roads led to, Marduk, so to speak, and not Rome in this case, although people like to think they do. So this was a big positive for us. We're still cleaning up additional systems as of this morning, so we're working on it. But the further we get in this process, the more their back doors go offline. So a lot of their systems that they used that would tie to this alien electronic computer system tied to Omega, the more their systems go offline. So that is a positive for us. It gives them less eyes, less ears, and of course, less fake currency schemes and everything else they're trying to do to us, and ID 2020 and MEGVI, spelled MEGVEII platforms, Skynet, as we talked about last week. It gives them less ability to try to utilize an old base platform, copy paste code, because ours is not copy pastable unless we say it is. and it's not even visible. It's encrypted.
Okay.
And for now, it won't always be, but for now it actually is. That doesn't mean it's going to affect people that are coding apps or games or, new softwares, because you're basing your platform on a platform that you still have access to. It's just the base coding to install something brand new. Like we want to come out with, Sunny operating system and Sunny phones. You can't actually do that right now unless we say so. It has to be this way because the only ones that ever used anything like this was the deep state,
right,
or had access to it, what limited access they did. And right now they're trying to do everything they possibly can to crash the dollar, crash the banking system, crash this, crash that.
Yeah.
They would like to be in full control.
So it's always a good day when we take out old alien tech and we replace it with anything that is alpha. And by the way, this is not so that we can control these companies. This is so they can't control us. There's a big difference because when you're sovereign, you don't try to control other beings. You let other beings make their decision. We are not trying to shut down every cabal corporation. What we want to do is bring out alternatives and let people decide what they want to do. That's how you function as a sovereign person. So Kim isn't doing this so that she could hit the, flick of a button or switch and suddenly turn off all their stuff. Now, that's what the dark threatened to do with their own people because they had to use control because they don't believe in sovereignty. But I just wanted to make that distinction because that's really important. Now, also later on, and this ties into Earth Day, guys. We actually didn't plan this, but since it was Earth Day, there was something Kim talked about it briefly on Friday, and she went into more detail on Monday's report. And that is some incredible things are happening on our planet that we first talked about upwards of a year ago. Those of you who remember the living water that we said was going to start flowing from the deserts, we are seeing deserts turning green. It's incredible. Now, I know mainstream is not reporting on this. Don't hold your breath on that one, okay? We are also seeing changes to how life is forming on this planet. Only Source could do this. This is not something that Kim did. Okay, we've been clearing and cleaning and doing that kind of stuff, but this is Source, okay? And so the second soundbite from the same newscast I want to play for you is about these incredible things that are happening on this planet. Stuff that hasn't happened before in 1.6 billion years. It's incredible. Take a listen.
We are seeing some very interesting things happening in the world. And I talked a little bit about this on Friday, but we're going to go into a little further detail today.
Okay.
So, deserts turning green. There is a lot of videos circulating around the internet and even in mainstream news outside of our CNNs and BBCs. I don't know if they're reporting it. But there are a lot of mainstream news channels in the Middle East talking about how the deserts are actually turning green. I think we have some video footage of that that our production team has pulled up. So very interesting. I mean, and this is all happening in the last few months.
Yeah.
Now, we knew this was going to be a direct indication of how well that area between Iran and Iraq was flourishing. And we talked about the living water and benefits of living water. And these areas where the deserts are turning green are very close to that particular spot.
Okay.
And it's spreading quite wildly at this moment. As you can see, it's pretty far apart where some of these places are, and they're reporting, they're seeing green grass and for the first time ever. And it's in a lot of the religious prophecies that the deserts would turn green and before the quote unquote judgment day of the Lord. Well, we're not going to have a judgment day, at least not for us, maybe for the deep state. And we can send them off to greener pastures, but don't. But this should, and I don't know how long it would actually take, but this should actually spread worldwide. And we should eventually have no more deserts.
Right.
So that's good. Now, another thing that indicates a lot of change that's happening in the world is something interesting has been discovered by scientists. Now, it's been going on for a little bit of time, but now they're coming out in mainstream news actually talking about. So this is an event that has only happened a couple of times in this planet's history, to whereby there is an evolutionary process going on that is changing the way life forms. So to give you kind of an example, one of these events that happened, and it happened billions of years ago, is when mitochondria was created. Mitochondria is basically the building block for all cells that are still present in organic life, such as humans, to this very day. And the creation of mitochondria is what actually was the base root and the beginning for all complex life forms on this planet. So this was a part of a natural source process, and the mitochondria are still part of all of us to this day. I mean, even though we've been genetically modified since then over and over and over again, it's still the base root for all complex life forms on the planet. So that's very exciting.
It's a base platform for humanity.
Base platform for humanity. That's right. Here we go. It's not a computer, though.
Right. It's organic.
It's organic.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Better than the other ones that attach to your head. So that's good.
For sure.
The next time that this event happened was, in science. Let's see, the science investigation into this leads them back to about 1.6 billion years ago. Now, I would say it was longer than that, but that is what our science tells us.
Okay.
So regardless of the time that it happened, this was a secondary event that took place probably about a billion or so years later, to 2 billion years later, according to science. At that time, that is when the first formation of chloroplast happened. And as you may or may not know, that chloroplast, can't talk today either. Doing better than I did on Friday, though. Chloroplast is the base root for photosynthesis and exists in all plants, and this allowed for plant life to grow on planet Earth.
Wow.
Now, our stories tell us that plants came first and then humans came after. I would agree with that fact, but this is what science tells us. Now, the time frame that we have as far as Earth years are concerned, how many trips around the sun we make is what we would call it, we are seeing something a little different. We're seeing it happen a lot faster. And I don't know if the science behind dating things chronologically is proper, but these are two significant events that were the building blocks for all complex life on the planet and all plant life on the planet. So these are exciting events. So the newest event that has taken place is a change in a specific type of algae on this planet, which is now acting in a way that no plant life has ever acted before. It actually has, this particular algae actually has a way of extracting nitrogen from the air based on it combining with another bacteria. I'm not going to go into the long version of the Latin name here. And almost using that bacteria as an organ unto itself. So as an example, say humans didn't have kidneys, and just giving you an example. Now, we know kidneys filter waste products. Without them functioning properly, people have to go on dialysis, and waste does not leave the body properly. It is an essential function of humans in order for you to stay alive.
Right.
So let's just say you happen to see a kidney creature running around, and then you absorb the kidney creature into the body, and then eventually all humans are born with kidneys. So that's kind of what's happening with this algae. It's before, humans without the kidney did not have the ability to remove waste products from the body, let's just say efficiently.
Yeah.
Of course, that's also done through the intestines and everything else. But in this case, now you have figured out a way to filter out liquid waste and waste products from your lymphatic system, rather than it building up in the body and us not living very long. So you've taken in the kidney bacteria or the kidney creature, you absorbed it into yourself, and now you have the ability to do that. Well, now this algae has a way combined with itself plus the new bacteria that it absorbed as now a part of themselves. And now it's replicating with that new bacteria in it, and it's giving it, for example, I guess you would say plant superpowers.
Wow.
So I know, very interesting.
So this is all tied back into our environment. Do you think it's trying to clean the air? It's okay.
It could possibly do that. It can do a lot of different things. Nitrogen is an essential part of life, but it'll be interesting to see the possibilities that arise from this new type of algae and what other types of life are going to morph or begin to morph and change based on the way that creation on this planet is also changing. Is Earth trying to clean itself? There's a lot of things that are possible within nature, and source is wonderful. Things that aren't supposed to be compatible aren't compatible. Things that you never thought would happen are now happening, and maybe that's based on the light coming into the planet. Deserts turning green, new types of life being formed on the planet. There's a lot going on that maybe doesn't seem momentous to you if you're watching videos about whether Trump's going to be reelected or not, but this is more important, I think, than everything we're seeing in the mainstream media show. This is the events that are taking place now haven't occurred in billions of years.
That's amazing. Don't you love it when you see that kind of verification out there? All right, so moving on. On Wednesday, there's just a couple things I want to briefly touch on. I'm not going to play any sound bites from Wednesday's newscast, but Kim did touch on chemtrails a little bit. So we had a period of time, and obviously this depends on where you're at in the world, where chemtrails seemed to clear up for a little bit. And now we're having what Kim calls chemtrails 2.0. So this is from Northrop Grumman, and they were hired basically to replace the old chemtrails with something a little bit different. Now, let me just make something very clear. The old chemtrails, they would stay in the sky a long time, and it was very obvious, right? That, there's a difference between that and a plane and the contrails from a plane, right? This stuff would stay up there forever. You'd get very sick, all of these kind of things. A lot of times people didn't know why they were getting sick, and they were just told that those were contrails in the sky. That's not true. But the technology and the nanoparticles and all of that were alien technology. But we have been removing, and by we, I'm talking about Kim and her team, removing these stashes of chemtrails, and the things that make chemtrails possible. We've been removing this. It's taken a lot longer than what we wanted. And I'm sure for you guys too, because I still look up in the sky and I see these. But what Kim wanted to update us on is that we are now seeing this Chemtrails 2.0, where Northrop Grumman has been hired to create like a new version of it. Doesn't have any alien tech in it. And we don't even know if this is really going to do anything. But Kim believes that it's tied to them wanting to do more weather manipulation. But you can tell that it's this chemtrail 2.0 because the trails disappear much faster, like 5 to 10 minutes, and you don't even see it in the sky. And I've actually seen this before. So I live in the San Diego area, and I've seen this in the sky. And I remember thinking, gosh, I just looked up and there was a chemtrail. Where did it go? Now I know where it went. It's this chemtrails 2.0. So you can listen to the report if you want more information on that. The other thing that Kim talks about, and she actually does this twice in the World Situation Report on Wednesday and then also on Friday, she goes into more in depth of care and what care is and what care isn't. And I'm not going to play sound bites from that for either Wednesday or Friday's report. But if you want more information about that, because we do have people that are stepping forward, God bless them, who want things to move forward. We all want restoration to happen. I get that, okay? But sometimes when people don't have a clear understanding of what care is and how care is going to run, they try to do things that aren't in alignment with care. So Kim had to explain some things on Wednesday because there's some misunderstandings out there. So you can check that out if you want to. Now, on Friday, Kim told a very interesting story that I hadn't heard before. Apparently, she told this story over a couple years ago, but I wasn't part of UNN at the time. So way back when it was kind of the earlier days of COVID, we were hearing these stories about the elite getting COVID and then being miraculously cured. And what Kim found out is that there was a guy with a machine. We'll leave it at that. We didn't actually learn too much more about the guy and his machine, but he was curing these elite people. So what Kim did, and this was a while ago, this is while Trump was in office, she said her and her team got the guy and his machine, dropped him off at the White House, almost like with a little note on him, with a note for Trump that says, hey, this is what this is. This is the person that created it. Even gave the funds to manufacture this device for the mass public, not just here in the US, but for people in general. And Trump, instead of doing the best thing for humanity, get this, he took the money and used it for Project Warp Speed. So if you're wondering, where did Trump get the money for all that BS with the vaccines? And, what I don't even know really what Warp Speed did, because you know that they had these vaccines in advance. So what the heck did they actually do with this money? But, I guess they had to get a funny looking little COVID logo and stuff like that. So this is what he used it for, to pay these people allegedly to create this vaccine quickly, which that's BS. That was already done. That's the whole reason COVID came out. So anyway, Kim tells that interesting story, which I think is good for people to know, because you really need to know who these politicians are and what they actually stand for, because that is about the furthest thing from a white hat that I can imagine. All right, so if you want to hear that story, check that out. The soundbite that I want to play for you has to do with the science behind how money is created. Because we think about the creation of money, you might think about some sort of mint or something like that prints money, but the actual creation, so that's just kind of what we see and how we, get it into our pockets or so, so to speak. But the actual creation of money is something totally different that most people have no idea about. Money is energy converted into matter. And believe it or not, it is ever flowing from our Creator. And Kim talks about E equals mc squared and how that is not how matter is created anymore, or energy, right? That's not how this whole process works anymore. So do you want to know how it was created? Because this is important as we move forward. Take a listen.
So you know that we've been working feverishly on the financial system. I mean, very heavily, daily, and it's not just financial systems, it's other types of security and stuff too. But changing the usage of money and the way that money is created, because money is energy. Yep. And it's ever flowing from our creator. And whether you put a dollar sign on it or a euro sign, it doesn't matter. In the system, it's still energy converted into matter that you can put in your wallet or your purse.
Right.
That's what it is. Now, the creation of money and into matter, or energy into matter, is actually not done with E equals mc squared anymore.
Right.
It's not. So the conversion process that has taken place to make that money created, to create that money, I should say, with T times E over V equals M in quantum computing, changes the meaning in what money actually is. So the reason why dark groups, dark bloodlines could control monetary systems and money for such a long time, and where the curse came from, and where the sayings like time is money come from, and the way our economic systems were created worldwide in a dark way, all has to do with curses on money, and the base root of that curse is E equals mc squared. It's the same thing with you and your person, because it takes both dark and light to create that money. Money could then be transmuted completely into what we know in our monetary system as M0, a negatively charged zero. Programming. If you know anything about computers or you've watched the movie The Matrix, you will see a plethora of zeros and ones.
Yeah, binary code.
Yes, binary code, making up what we call bytes, which is the base root for all programming worldwide. Well, in the past, a zero would have represented omega, anti-existence, dark time, I mean, you name it. In dark consciousness, dark energy, anti-matter, anti-frequency, everything that is detrimental to your person. And the ones represented alpha and how they worked together back and forth. It was a fusion, so to speak. But the conversion of M0 from a negatively charged zero, and the same thing goes for binary code. The zeros now represent a positive, and a positive charge directly to source.
Okay.
So zeros could have represented in the past, and I'm telling you this because it's tied to what we're doing with care and how we prevent these problems from happening in the future. Zeros in the past would have represented anti-source, anti-existence, dark things. But ultimately, it represented the absence of everything, what you would call the no thing. So in the very center of the ninth density of the lower astral, just past the ninth density, I should say, and just past the ninth plane. So there's a space there called the no thing space. It is full. Well, I call it the no thing. I don't know what you want to call it. I'm sure there's a quantum physics term for it. Some in physics may call it a super void or a void, but it's not really a void because a void would indicate it's the absence of matter. And that's not entirely true. So when you get up to source, you actually have the opposite. Now, what that means is you are basically in an area where there is pure essence, pure light, pure matter, all in one place, with the absence of only one thing, which is distance or frequency. So it's just a solid mass, so to speak, of light.
Okay.
Essence, energy, consciousness, matter, wisdom, love, however you want to say it. And that's what you're looking at. And that would be considered in quantum physics as a zero or a 0 point. There is a place there where it's everything. So it's the opposite. In anti-source, it was the no thing, or a negatively charged zero. And then on the other side, you had a positively charged zero of the everything. All of creation exists in this one little spot, or in this one little God particle, or in this one little spark. And so we actually switched over a while back the meaning behind the zero. So it's now a positively charged zero with a string of numbers attached to it, bringing you all the way to a 9, which then doesn't represent 9 densities, 9 planes, 9 sections of omega anymore. It actually represents the 9 segments of alpha.
Okay.
Divided into 9 by 9 by 9 by 9. So now it's alpha harmonic genesis, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1 of creation. What that means in monetary terms is at the very base root of the creation of money, money is no longer cursed, meaning it's all wholly of source because the equation of its creation is different, which means that it can no longer even flow to anything omega or chronos. Like it doesn't go into a dark AI system for them to then utilize it for dark. There's no transmutation process. Because when something is both, just like within yourself as a person, you can have mostly light consciousness, you can have mostly dark consciousness, whichever one you feed. And it's the same thing with money. You could have registered an agreement at that time in the dark hall of records, and the money could then be converted to be utilized by dark bloodlines for dark purposes. And that's about the best way I can explain it, not using quantum physics in terms that no one would understand. So now it's created in a completely different way, which means in the Hall of Records is ours and the only one that is left. So creation of money in this way can only be used for purposes of things registered in the Hall of Records. If the deep state is watching this and you're wondering why every single agreement you try to submit to the Hall of Records on the daily, all day long, every day, gets rejected immediately, it's because you're trying to put dark energy into a light system.
Yeah, see, that doesn't work anymore. And that's for the betterment of humanity. So it's a light system. You have to do good things with it. You have to help the planet. You have to help the beings on this planet. Doing nefarious stuff and starting wars and, spreading different diseases and causing harm in different ways. Yeah, it's just not going to work anymore. The other thing that Kim talks about briefly, as I mentioned, she talked about care both on Wednesday and Friday. And on Friday, she talked about specific algorithms that CARE has in place to prevent the stealing of technology, and then also to ensure accountability within projects. So if you're thinking about submitting for a project to get your project funded as part of the restoration of our planet, that's probably a good newscast for you to check out, okay? So go to Friday. So Friday would have been the 26th of April, and check that out because it's important to know that no one's going to fool the system, okay? If you are accepting funds to do something, it's got to be a positive thing for humanity like we just talked about. But you also have to truly use those funds. And Kim uses an example of how if you don't do that, the money will be rescinded. And what I found really interesting about that, it's not just money, like let's say it goes into your business account, whatever business you have set up. It's not just money coming out of your business that you haven't spent yet. It's wherever that money went, it will be rescinded from any of those accounts. So let's say you spent a bunch of money on whatever, a boat or something that, some yacht as opposed to working on your project. Whoever you paid for that yacht, they're not going to have that money anymore. And so you probably going to have to give back the boat, whatever it is, make that right somehow, which is different than what we've seen in the past. So it's not just like, I'll just spend all the money or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's going to come out of wherever it went. And that is good. That is a good thing for accountability and for all of us to understand moving forward, because the way things have been done in the past, there is no accountability. People just, there were black budgets everywhere. And, trillions of dollars would go missing from the Pentagon. And no one bats an eye. Are you kidding me? So we have to make sure those things don't happen again. So if you want to learn more about that, again, that was on Friday's newscast. You can check out that show for more information. All right, guys, that is it for us. I appreciate you guys listening. Remember, I know we talked about some big stuff. Do your own research. Continue to have an open mind. We talk about having a cup that's half full. If your cup is completely full and you try to put more into it, it's going to spill all over the place and, you're not going to take anything else in. So have a cup that's only half full. Always be willing to listen. Use your own discernment. If you like today's episode, I encourage you guys to share it with the people that you care about. And if you want more information, you can subscribe to us, become a member, go to unitednetwork.earth. And that's where you can get on-demand access to all the UNN newscasts, the complete world situation reports. And usually Kim is on for at least an hour and a half, talking sometimes 2 hours. So there's a lot of good content there. We also have some original series. And while you're there, you can comment under the videos. I know Kim sometimes comments. I'm in there quite a bit, just checking out what you guys have to say. So it is, it's a really great way to connect with us. And you can also follow us on social media. At the bottom navigation of unitednetwork.earth, on that page, you will find all of the links. So check us out there. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.